You're listening to Dakota Spotlight, a production of Forum Communications. My name is James Wolner. This is Season 6, Vanishing Act, the untold story of Kristin, Diede, and Bob Anderson. A quick note, this episode contains content that may be alarming to some listeners. Please check the show notes for more detailed descriptions and take care of yourself. And if you're listening with children, consider whether it's appropriate for them as well. I'm co-producing this season with Jeremy Fugleberg. Here he is.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Fugleberg. Welcome to Episode 2, Last Days. Bloomington, Minnesota, August 1993.
She's like, well, we're trying to go up to, she said, I'm trying to go up to North Dakota to get my stuff, and I think I'll be gone for the weekend. You should just stay at the apartment. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that would be fun. And if I could, say to her right now, if I could go back, I would tell her, whatever it is you have up there isn't worth it. I would tell Bob, don't take her up there. No, it's not worth it.
That's Kristin Diede's neighbor friend in Bloomington at the time, Tiffany. A lot was ending for Kristin in August 1993, but it was also a fresh beginning. For starters, she was a new single parent. Her husband, Clyde Diede, had moved out the previous year. Then in May, according to court records we obtained, he was found guilty of domestic violence against Kristin, 5th-degree assault. Part of his probation conditions was a 2-year-long order barring him from contacting Kristin. He could still see their kids. We'll circle back to this incident later, and you'll hear directly from Clyde. But that August, in 1993, Kristin seemed to be moving on. She'd made new friends, 2 strong, independent women, Tiffany, who you've already met, and Heather, who also lived in her apartment building. They both took to her right away. Here's Heather.
We had kids that played together. She lived downstairs and across the hall. I lived on the main floor on the other side of the hall. And we became friends. We would see each other every day. Sometimes I was working as a home health aide. And sometimes she would watch my kids. Sometimes I would watch her kids. We just became close.
And Tiffany.
And she was scared. She was a little girl. She was tiny. And she if she could fight back, there wouldn't be much of a fight because she was just an itty-bitty thing.
Kristin and her newly estranged husband Clyde had gotten married in North Dakota in 1983. In the rural area they grew up, outside the tiny town of Wishek, they were practically neighbors. Their families' farms were just a few miles away from each other. Now, 10 years later, they had 2 kids together, Mitchell, age 9, and Deanna, age 6. The family had moved to Minnesota, where Clyde was attending chiropractic school. But now, Kristin was on her own. Fortunately, she had her neighbor friends, and they were there to help coax her out of her shell. Here's Heather again.
I don't know how we actually started going to this one bar, but twice a week, my one girlfriend, or Tiffany, she would watch her kids, and we would go to, I can't remember exactly even what the name of the bar was, but it was I think Maplewood. It was a ways away, and either she would drive or I would drive, and we just dance, and she was she would dance, so never danced before, and she was so she didn't really drink an excessive amount of anything, really. But
with the new stomping grounds came a new relationship for Kristin. There was now a new man in her life, Bob Anderson. She had met him at the bar. Her friends remember the two immediately clicked. Heather again.
I guess the weirdest, she was very this is a weird word to use, but sedate, quiet, and reserved, very in tune with her children, and very happy to just be her and her kids until Bob. And then it was almost like a different Kristin. She was happy and never thought that she could feel free with a man, and loved and respected, and he loved her kids, and they were amazing together. He was also very passive too, actually. He was quiet and reserved and calm, and they were very much alike.
Both Tiffany and Heather approved of Bob. Kristin obviously really liked him too. So much so that Heather remembers Kristin found it hard to believe a good guy like Bob could even exist.
And Bob was close with his family too. But I said, see, he's close with his family. He's a good guy. You know? At first she was like, really, is this real? But he was really close to his family, and she was so freaked out that it was not going to work. There was something like the other shoe was going to fall or whatever, probably because of her past. You know, she never thought that she would find that. Yeah, they're like perfect for each other. I mean, perfect, like peanut butter and jelly.
So when Kristin announced she was planning to travel back to North Dakota by herself on an upcoming August weekend, Bob stepped in. He was going too. We played a bit of what Tiffany told us at the top of the episode. Here's the whole segment.
So I was pregnant. Heather kept making this chicken that smelled terribly to me because I get sick. And I was complaining to Kristin about it. She's like, well, you know, we're trying to go up to, well, she said, I'm trying to go up to North Dakota to get my stuff, and I think I'll be gone for the weekend. You should just stay at the apartment. I'm like, oh, yeah, that would be fun. That was a couple days before, and I was like, yeah, so I'd go stay down in the apartment. Well, Robert got a hold of this, and he's like, you're not going up there by yourself, and I'm going to go with you. So after that, she came up and she was like, okay, he's going to go with. Now, me and Heather felt a lot better about that because we knew about her problems with her ex-husband or soon-to-be ex-husband. And so we were concerned. When she told us that Bob was going with her, we were really just felt a lot more at ease. I felt good about it. And I was really happy to hear like he just didn't want her to go and do this by herself, and he was going with to protect her.
For decades, the conventional wisdom on this case has been this. Kristin drove up to North Dakota that weekend with her kids. They were going to spend time with their dad's family at a wedding in Wahpeton, North Dakota. That's what the North Dakota Attorney General's office posted on its cold case site listing about Kristin and Bob. That's what Clyde told us, Kristin's then husband. So did her sister, Sandra. And so did the lone television news report on the case from WCCO, broadcast 2 years after they vanished. But several key eyewitnesses of Kristin and Bob's movements that weekend disagree. They say Kristin wasn't taking her kids to North Dakota. She was instead performing something of a secret mission. While her in-laws, her husband, and much of the Diede clan would be over 150 miles away for the wedding, the Diede farmstead outside of Wishek would be unmanned. Kristin and Bob could swoop in under the radar, enter the quiet property, retrieve her belongings from the farm, and be gone in a flash. As it happens, many members of Kristin's own family, the Gables, were also headed out of town that weekend on a trip to Idaho. For reasons we'll get into in the next episode, she had also distanced herself from them. It seems she thought this same trip would be a chance to get some things from her own family farm too. Based on this version of what happened, Kristin Diede wasn't delivering her kids. She was reclaiming her life. Here's Tiffany, who was staying at Kristin's apartment while she was gone, recollecting what was really going down that weekend.
So I went down on Thursday night, I believe, and she said, well, Mitchell and Deanna's father's going to come pick them up because they have a family reunion.
I spoke to Clyde Diede about this question. Just last week, I called him at his chiropractic office in Winter, South Dakota. Clyde answered some questions, but didn't want to speak much about the whole subject of Kristin's disappearance. It was not a comfortable call. He eventually cut the interview short, saying he didn't want me to ask him any more questions then or later. Although, to be honest, we have more questions, and we'll likely call him again to see if he'll talk to us. And Clyde, if you're listening, I hope you'll consider speaking to us again. So here's Clyde on Kristin, their kids, her stuff, and that no contact order in place at the time. We'll play the whole back and forth from my interview with him. Sorry about the static on the phone line. So when Kristin came up that weekend, you said she was bringing her kids to you. We were talking to somebody else, and they had mentioned that it was actually your sister who picked them up. Does that ring a bell at all, or is that not how you remember it?
Her sister that brought him to me, you say?
Your sister is what we heard.
No, she dumped them in my care.
Okay.
She did.
There's also some people we talked to said she was going up there to get some stuff or to take some stuff away. Is that ring a bell at all?
It had nothing to do with me.
What does that mean?
My only business with her was her leaving the kids. That was it.
Okay. How did that work? Because from my understanding, is there was a no contact order in place at the time. How did that work with the kids' handoff?
I don't know about a no contact order.
So that's my understanding, is one of the probation conditions for you after that domestic assault charge was a 2-year no contact order.
Well, apparently it wasn't stipulated. I had no interest in contacting her in any way, shape, or form. So when she turned up and left the kids, I had an opportunity to be with the kids for a while. And that was all I was interested in.
There'll be more from our interview with Clyde in future episodes. So, while Clyde says Kristin dumped the kids with him, several other key eyewitnesses we talked to don't agree with him on how the kids got to him in North Dakota. As you'll hear later, Kristin and Bob stopped at the home of Bob's brother Dean on their way to North Dakota, and no, Dean agrees with Tiffany, the kids were not along with Kristin and Bob. So, why the confusion about the kids? And why is it even a big deal? We think it's a central question, actually. It explains why Kristin was bound and determined to go to North Dakota, and it's crucial to understand her mindset that weekend. And, as you'll see, the kids are central to the trip going bad. But before we move on, I want to talk really quick about how we as journalists sort through this kind of thing, when you have conflicting stories about what happened. Now, generally the best people to describe what actually happened are the ones closest to what happened, the eyewitnesses. But only a handful of people directly dealt with Kristin and Bob that weekend, and none of them were tracking their every move. Remember, this is 1993. There was no social media, where people often leave a trail of digital crumbs marking where they go and what they do. There's no cell phones in every pocket with people texting, "Where are you? Are you there yet?" So we're left to piece together what we can, based on evidence and the few people who were directly involved with Kristin and Bob that weekend and are willing and able to talk to us. And important to remember, this is a live investigation. There are still stones unturned here. If we get new definitive information, we'll be sure to share it with you in a future episode to correct and update the record. In this case, about the kids, we lean toward believing those who actually interacted with Kristin and Bob that weekend, specifically Tiffany and Bob's brother Dean. It's possible Kristin told different stories to different people, or maybe her plans changed. It might be just that simple, or not. But no matter what happened, one thing is crystal clear. Whether Kristin drove her 2 kids to North Dakota or not, they became a central part of what comes next. So, back to that weekend in August 1993. It's Friday, the 13th of August. Kristin Diede and Bob Anderson set out on the last journey of their lives. Remember how Clyde was supposedly going to stop by and pick up Mitchell and Deanna from Tiffany to take the kids to a family get-together, that wedding in Wahpeton, North Dakota? Here's the thing. According to Tiffany, who was at Kristin's apartment with the 2 children, Clyde never showed.
Well, it came time, And I remember he didn't show up. I think it was a sister of his showed up, which I thought was odd. He didn't show up. He was supposed to show up because that's who picked him up every other time. So, but a family member, I'm not sure if it was his sister, but I seem to remember she saying she was his sister. And because I wouldn't just pass off the kids to just anyone. So I'm pretty sure I made sure who she was. And there was no cell phones back then either. So, it wasn't like pick up the phone and call somebody, to verify. But I felt pretty good about handing them to the sister. So they took their stuff, was waiting, and they took it and went on with them.
By then, Kristin and Bob were already gone on the road. Later that day, Friday, they made a pit stop at the house of Bob's older brother, Dean Anderson, and his wife, Julie. They lived in White Bear Lake, just northeast of the Twin Cities. Here's Dean describing that visit to my colleague, James Wolner. The other voice you'll hear is Diane, Bob's sister.
I knew he was going to Wishing. I was at work, and he stopped over at our house, and my wife, Julie, made some popcorn. He had a couple beers, and he was very relaxed, and he told my wife, he says, well, I'd like to stay here and forget about it. And Kristin right away said, no, we have to go. And that was the last person to see him in our family or our relative.
So Kristin, Diede was with him?
Yes.
They both came to your place?
Yes.
As were the kids, right?
No.
So Kristin and Bob headed out. Based on our interview with her sister, Sandra, who you'll hear from later, it seems as if they made it to North Dakota that night and stayed at the home of Kristin and Sandra's brother, Larry. So far, so good. They'd made it to North Dakota. Kristin expected that Clyde had picked up the kids for the wedding. Her family was headed out of town the next morning. So she and Bob were clear to grab her things and get out without anyone being the wiser. So far, everything was going according to plan for Kristin and Bob, as far as they knew anyway. Saturday, August 14th, 1993. Kristin Diede and Bob Anderson are in the area of Wishek, North Dakota, in Bob's van, a white 1979 Dodge B200. We don't know exactly what Kristin wanted to retrieve from Wishek, which is a little frustrating, but we can take some educated guesses based on what everyone has told us. It seems she was planning to get things from both the Diede and the Gable place, her family's farm. Now, we usually sort through what everyone said in our interviews with them and pick those sound clips that are clearest and most accurate. That's kind of our job. But in this case, to give you a taste of what it's like to navigate the uncertainty of this kind of thing, we're going to a shotgun approach. Here's nearly every version of what people think Kristin was getting from North Dakota that weekend. Here's Diane, Bob's sister.
They went to Wishek to get some belongings of Kristin's at her parents' place because she was going to finalize the divorce and she wanted her belongings out of the house.
And here's Susan Nice. At the time, she was executive director of Cornerstone Advocacy Services, which helps battered women, and had helped Kristin.
She went to, they went to her family home to retrieve some belongings. There was something there that belonged to Kristin that she wanted back, and there was a confrontation at that time with the father and I think one of the brothers, and I do not know if she actually got her belongings or if the confrontation just, escalated and she and Bob left. I think that she felt because she was with Bob that it was safe for her to go to her family home and I don't think it was anything big. It might have been some childhood mementos or, I really...
And Chase Anderson, Bob's son, who you might remember from episode 1.
I also know that in the process of them going to Wishek, Kristin wanted to retrieve a jewelry box that she had a lot of pictures in, that incriminating pictures of some things that were going on in the family.
Then here's Travis, Kristin's nephew, about what he heard had gone missing from the Gable place.
A bunch of pictures were gone, and some other stuff. I can't remember what it was. Like value stuff. But a bunch of pictures, all the pictures were gone, I guess. That's what my aunt told me.
And finally, here's Sandra, Kristin's sister. She's talking with James Wolner about what was missing from the house after that weekend. In this conversation, Sandra refers to Kristin as Valerie, the name she was given after birth. In our next episode, we'll explain the issue of the different names. Here's James with Sandra. We'll run this clip long. It's an interesting back and forth.
Question. Do you know anything about that weekend, about Valerie stealing or being accused of stealing something either out of your dad's farm or the Diede farm, like a jewelry box or something?
Jewelry box?
Or some belongings. Like she came back, she was going to get some of her stuff. It gets confusing if people are talking about getting stuff back from Clyde's parents or from your parents, and that there was some kind of confrontation. Have you ever heard of any of that?
Valerie never had no more belongings at our house. She was gone a long, long, long time before this was all took place. Things that were left there, and they weren't even hers that she took. That I'm not saying she took, but someone took. All her baby pictures, or school pictures, they were all gone. All her school pictures are gone that were out on the farm. It's kind of funny because all of our pictures, like my brother's and mine, still there.
In case you didn't catch all that, Sandra said that all of Kristin's childhood photos went missing from their farm, but she doesn't know who took them for sure. Interestingly, photos of the rest of the Gable family are still intact. But when it comes to figuring out what actually happened, we're leaning toward the version from the source closest to Kristin, who discussed it with her directly, her friend and neighbor, Tiffany.
I thought she's like her memory sakes, like stuff when Mitchell and Deanna were young, little, and just stuff that obviously was precious to her. So I'm assuming it was baby stuff from the kids and maybe some of things that she had from her own home. She didn't come from a great home from what I understood. So everything she had was always just with her, her important things, and she didn't have those things. And that's why it was so urgent for her to get those. She was ending that whole relationship with her ex-husband. She just wanted to make sure when the chapter was closed that it was completely locked up.
Okay, back to that Saturday with Kristin and Bob in Wishek. My colleague James talked to Sandra, Kristin's sister, who confirmed she saw and spoke with her sister that Saturday morning at their brother Larry's place.
You left for Idaho the same weekend she went missing?
The day before she went missing. I stopped there to say something to my brother to take care of the house and take care of the farm. And she was there. And I said a few words to her, and then I jumped back in the car, and I packed up the other car when I got home, and we left for Idaho.
Which brother was that again? Was that Larry or Kevin?
Larry. So she was alive when we left.
If you missed that, Sandra said, so she was alive when we left. So that was Saturday morning. From there, we just don't have a lot of information about what exactly Kristin and Bob did next, either on Saturday or early Sunday. But we do know that at some point in those 2 days, they went to the Diede farm. That's where they ran into someone they did not expect. Kristin's then husband, the one with a no-contact order to keep him away from Kristin, Clyde. No, he wasn't in Bloomington, Minnesota. He wasn't at the wedding in Wahpeton. He was, of all places, right there. In a flash, their big plan to get Kristin's things while everyone was gone without dealing with anyone over it, that plan evaporated. Now, instead, they were dealing with Clyde.
Hi there, it's me, James Wolner, producer, Dakota Spotlight Podcast. We'll be back to the story in pretty much exactly 30 seconds. Want to join our hunt for missing people and support our work on this podcast? Want to get unlimited access to an online treasure trove of subscriber-only articles and information about Dakota Spotlight and other historical true crime? Become a member by subscribing to Forum Communications. Go to www.inforum.com patreon.com/subscribe. Tell them James sent you, and thanks.
Now, again, a quick chat about what we know and what we don't know. When did Kristin and Bob run into Clyde? We don't know for sure. Maybe it was Saturday, after she saw and talked to Sandra. It could have also been Sunday morning. He could have been there when they arrived. He could have shown up after they got there. We don't know for sure. Was Clyde alone? Again, we don't know. Presumably, Kristin and Clyde's kids attended the wedding in Wahpeton, which was on Saturday. Would they have then traveled the 150-some miles to Wishek in company of Clyde's family members on Saturday night? Or maybe that's what happened on Sunday. That's right, we just don't know. Now stick with me. In a second, we'll get back to the confirmed timeline of events on Sunday. However, remember how we told you this is a live ongoing investigation? Well, after we released episode 1 last week, we were contacted by a Wishek native who knew Kristin Diede and can place her in Stan's Super Value grocery store in Wishek that Sunday. In fact, they spoke with her. Now, we've learned that the Super Value was open between 10 and 3 p.m. on Sundays, and our source is certain this sighting was in the summer of 1993 on a Sunday. We're not aware that Kristin was in Wishek any other weekend that year. So it's quite possible the sighting and interaction may have taken place just hours before Kristin and Bob vanished. It's little details like that that can really add up to a more complete picture. Maybe not by themselves, but as a puzzle piece with all the other bits of evidence James and I have collected in our investigation. So folks, if you have any knowledge about Kristin and Bob's movements that weekend, please get in touch. Our contact information is at the end of this episode. But back to what we know for sure. On Sunday, Kristin sought help from law enforcement, and later that day, she had a confrontation with Clyde. Sunday, August 15th, 1993. The day they disappeared. Wes Meidinger was a trooper in the North Dakota Highway Patrol. He was based out of the Wishek police office. And he was on duty that Sunday when a couple showed up asking for help. My colleague James, who loyal listeners know is a dogged reporter with Dakota Spotlight, recently interviewed Meidinger for the second time in 7 years. Meidinger knew Kristin when she was younger. Back when, if you recall, her name was Valerie. So when he calls her Valerie in this clip, remember, Valerie is Kristin. Here's Meidinger.
It was a Sunday afternoon, and I was working in the office at the police department in Wishek, and these two people came in. The one I knew, Valerie Diede, was a male, fairly tall. Find out later his last name was Anderson. I don't recall his first name. They were curious about whether a child custody order that was issued in North Dakota was good in Minnesota. And being as I didn't deal with that kind of stuff, I wrote down the name of Jerry Kuhn, who was the state's attorney in Logan County, because this supposedly was where the action had taken place. Gave him that information, and they left, and I never saw them again. I don't know if they contacted the state's attorney in Logan County or not, and come to find out later that these folks had disappeared.
Right. Yeah. I mean, thank you so much. A question. Is it possible that the documents they were asking about was the other way around, that they were asking if a child, some kind of order in Minnesota was valid in North Dakota? Could it have been that direction?
I guess that's a possibility. It's been a while. I don't recall exactly what order that came in.
Do you happen to remember what had taken place that had brought them there? Like any more specifics?
Well, there was Valerie had divorced her husband, whose last name was Diede. The first name escapes me now. But I believe it had been finalized, and the custody battle, or whatever you want to call it, was still ongoing.
So this is curious, because Kristin and Clyde were not yet divorced. They had no child custody order at the time. So what is Meidinger referring to here, or remembering, or misremembering? There was a no-contact order in effect for Clyde when it came to Kristin, implemented as a probation condition for his domestic violence conviction in Minnesota. Again, we have court records proving that was in place, regardless of Clyde's memory of it or not. It would be reasonable if she'd run into Clyde that she'd want to find out if that no contact order from Minnesota had power in North Dakota too, an order that should have the power to keep her husband away from her. Also, important to note, Meidinger referred them to the state's attorney in Logan County, where the Diede place was located. Susan Nice at the Cornerstone Shelter remembers it that way, possibly passed on to her from Kristin's friends or the Cornerstone staffer who helped Kristin.
And so what Kristin did is she called a girlfriend, let her know what was going on, and went to the sheriff's office and asked if her order for protection was valid in North Dakota. She was told yes, there was reciprocity, so it was good. And essentially that is the last time that we or her friends ever heard from Kristin.
It seems most likely that Kristin was asking Trooper Meidinger about the no contact order, and also mentioned her children, who very well might have been with Clyde back at the farm right then. Here's Meidinger again.
I really don't know what her intentions were, other than it dealt with the children. And that's something that we in the Highway Patrol did not deal with.
Another thing Trooper Meidinger remembered, where Kristin and Bob were headed next.
Your understanding was they were headed to the Diede farm outside of Wishek.
I believe that was correct, yeah.
By this point on Sunday, Tiffany, Kristin's friend back in Bloomington, Minnesota, hadn't heard anything from her all weekend.
I didn't hear anything from her Saturday, so I thought that was kind of strange. She was supposed to have done everything that day.
But Sunday night, Tiffany's phone rang. It was Kristin, and there was trouble. We're going to play this whole conversation as Tiffany remembers it. Pay close attention. Tiffany is the last person we know of to hear from Kristin before she and Bob disappeared.
I pick up the phone, and it was her, Kristin, and she's like, "Hi, Tiff." I'm like, "Hi, how are you doing? Did you get your stuff?" She's like, "No, I'm here now." And I can hear the kids in the background, and I can hear other people. I'm like, "Is everything okay?" She's like, "Yeah, he's here. He showed up with the kids." And I'm like, "Showed up with the kids?" And she goes, "Yeah. But we're going to go get the stuff, and we're going to leave." And I'm like, "Well, where's Bob?" And he's like, "He's out in the car." And then it sounded like he must have walked in, because I heard Bob walked in, because I'm sure he heard the yelling and screaming of the kids and wanted to make sure everything was okay, and came in the house, and it just went awry. I mean, I could just hear a lot of screaming, and to me it sounded like the husband was yelling at her. His mom was yelling at her, I think, like, "Get off the phone, you need to deal with this," or something. I'm like, "Are you sure everything's okay?" She's like, "Yeah. Yeah, we're gonna get the stuff out of the barn or whatever. We'll pack it up, and we're gonna be leaving. We'll be home either tonight late or early morning type, in the morning, or on Monday." And I was like, "Okay, are you sure you're okay?" "Yep." And she hung up. Yeah, but I heard all three. Well, I heard all three of the adults' voice and her, because I was talking to her, but I heard the three other adults' voices, and then I could hear the kids crying. And Mitchell always wanted to take care of Deanna, so there was something that's triggering in the back of my mind, saying that I heard Mitchell saying, "Come on, Deanna," or, "Stop crying, Deanna," because I recognized right away that the kids were there, both of them, because I know I heard them.
The conversation felt ominous to Tiffany, as Kristin sketched out her plans, with crying and screaming in the background.
"Can't talk to you about it right now. He's taking me to get the stuff. Then we're going to pack it up, and we're leaving. We'll be leaving tonight. We'll either be home really late tonight, early morning, or we'll be home tomorrow. But we're leaving ASAP." So, and then she hung up. I didn't feel very good about that conversation.
That was the last time Tiffany talked to her friend Kristin. We played a bit of this next clip at the top of the show, but we're going to play it out longer this time. Here's Tiffany's closing thoughts on Kristin's disappearance.
And if I could say to her right now, if I could go back, I would tell her, whatever it is you have up there isn't worth it. I would tell Bob, don't take her up there. No, it's not worth it. The one thing she wanted in this life was to raise her children, and what she did for her mementos took her away from her children. I do want to say one more thing, and that is that this world would have been a better place with her in it. And this world shines just a little bit less that she's gone.
Look, we know this episode was jam-packed with a lot of information. It's a lot to take in. And like us, I'm sure you have a lot of questions after hearing what you've just heard. I promise you, James and I are going to address some of those key questions and more in future episodes. Up next, Episode 3, Kristin is Not Her Name. Who was Kristin Diede? Why was she trying to escape her hometown, Wishek? What happened with her relationship to her husband, Clyde? And who was Bob Anderson?
Hello. Hi.
From the Diede farm to the Goebel farm, it was like...
Is this a Gable residence?
I think I remember her saying that she stayed home a lot from school.
Why she was always looking over her shoulder and fidgety.
She was appalled, as were other people in the courtroom.
He hurt her, and it just was a very scary situation, and she's trying to get out of it.
Dakota Spotlight is a production of Forum Communications. Season 6, Vanishing Act, is produced by me, James Wolner.
And by me, Jeremy Fugleberg. Remember, the investigation into what happened to Kristin and Bob remains an open case. Everyone is innocent until proven guilty in a court of law.
If you have any information about this case, contact law enforcement at the Logan County, North Dakota Sheriff's Office. The number is 701-754-2495.
If you have any tips or information you think could help us as we continue to report this podcast, please reach out. You can contact me, Jeremy Fugleberg, via email at jfugleberg@forumcom.com. That's J, my first initial, last name Fugleberg, Fugleberg, at forumcom, that's FORUMCOMM.com. I'm also on Twitter at jfug, that's JAYFUG.
To contact me, James Wolner, email me at jwolner@forumcom.com. That's JWOLNER@forumcom.com. That's FORUMCOMM.com. Or follow me on Twitter at Dakota Spotlight. And why not join the Dakota Spotlight Facebook group? Just search Dakota Spotlight on Facebook.
To read and research more about the case, check out the documents and photos we've uncovered at inforum.com/Dakota Spotlight.
Please consider subscribing to the podcast on Spotify or Apple or anywhere you get your podcasts. If you like this show and want others to discover it, please consider leaving us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts.
To support Dakota Spotlight, consider becoming a member of all Forum Communication news websites. To do so, head over to inforum.com/subscribe. Dakota Spotlight is a Forum Communications Company podcast.